LakeFace, you fucking dumbass! Jake shouted at me over the music, slightly upset that I didn't recognize his poorly made paper mache mask that looked like little else than a green lump. I'm gonna wall face you if you talk to me like that again, I countered. We both laughed and proceeded to get drunk. Now, Walker, Minnesota isn't exactly a prestigious place to live. Some would call it a dump between nowhere and rock bottom, though you'd probably get sucked in the face for saying that out loud over here. But on Halloween, even the mayor stops his sneaky curtain drawn office drinking and gets shit faced at the local event hell like the rest of us. I suppose it's a sad kind of poetic that the one night we drop the charade and give in to what we really are is the one night everyone puts a mask on. Well, anyway, that's what made me think of LakeFace again, and what got me into creepypastas and urban legends. Jake's drunk ass and his shitty costume. Every town has their own urban legend, as they always say. Ours is no different. Where other towns have cursed tunnels or abandoned asylums, we have a cursed tree stump in a lake that kind of looks like a face and grants wishes. I know, exhilarating. Now, we aren't unlike any other backwood dot on the map. We have our fair share of people that go missing. Most are runaways, and the ones that make it away from this place usually just end up under a bridge in a slightly bigger city. Despite that, our town was only creative enough for one urban legend, LakeFace. My now ex-girlfriend became another name to add to the list of victims LakeFace claimed. To be fair, despite the drinking and smoking like a chimney, she didn't really fit the profile of your average runaway junkie that much. She was a happy person, she had a steady job at the laundromat, and we had some good fun. As usual, I stood under the thick oak tree that leaned slightly to the side and waited for her mother's light to go out, for her to climb out of the trailer window. We'd often go for a drive outside of town. I'd listen to her rant about whatever her ambitious aspiration of the week was. We'd fuck on the hood of my car. We'd turn back to the main road and get a few more drinks in, and I'd drop her off at home again before her mother woke up. That night, though, I'd gotten a flat tire outside of town, and with no intention to walk back the handful of miles just yet, we headed into the woods. She'd always have these dumb ideas and convince herself they sound romantic or adventurous, and I just go along with it, to be honest. Under the full moon, the woods were just lit enough to not break your neck, but still dark enough to sprain an ankle. We had been walking for a decent while, with her clinging onto my arm and giggling every time she nearly fell, before I realized we would be spending the entire night in the woods if we didn't pay attention to where we left the car. She looked at me dumbfounded for a second, and promptly changed direction, sure of herself that the car would be in whichever way she suddenly felt like walking. As I turned to grab her arm, I stopped dead in my tracks. Between the thin trees, I could make out what I could only describe as a spectacle of light. There lay a lake, the lake, I would soon find out. My legs moved on their own, as if driven by the sense of wonder I had longed for since childhood, so dreadfully rare to come across in a town like this. When I arrived, the trees cleared out in a seemingly perfect edge a few yards away from the lake, the whole scene so perfectly lit in the moonlight, the algae in the water glimmering like long threads of bright emeralds, suspended and unmoving, the water still as death and clear as glass, like a cage cast around an ancient danger. Now I had seen the face before, the stump, the disappointing lump of rotten wood a foot below the surface. It had never looked like a face to me, but here and now, with the pale touch of the full moon over it and the eerie green glow cast from around it, I could see it, unmistakable, a face, an ugly and bitter face. As a recent aficionado of horror, the first thought I had was to take out my phone and take about a dozen pictures. My second thought was, what if? I want a full scholarship to Harvard. I spoke softly, almost embarrassed, keeping my eyes focused intensely on the face in the water, waiting for it to do anything, to move just a feather's width. Instead, I was greeted by a silence so pertinent it felt like going deaf. Not a bug, not a bird, not the rustling of leaves. Nothing then, but a soft breeze floating over the lake, just enough to stir the thin layer of mist covering its banks, as if an ice-cold breath gently brushed my legs. A tongue of silvery mist licked my shoes. I repeated. Jasmine. The lake stirred again and repeated my girlfriend's name once more, just a little more drawn out, as if the last effort a dying man could muster. As if I awoke from a trance, I turned around and rushed into the woods. Jasmine and her dumb drunk ass were trekking off into the dark, and God knows what she would get herself into if I didn't take her back to the car. It took me just a minute or two, in truth. She hadn't even made it 10 yards before sitting down and opening another can of beer. "Where were you?" she asked in a tone more than just a little annoyed. "I've been sitting here for ages." "Let's just go home, Jasmine." The moment her name left my lips, it felt like the voice of the lake slipped inside my mouth and breathed the name with me. I ended up deciding to show Jasmine the lake, nursing a sensation of guilt stirring somewhere inside me that has not left me since, telling myself that nothing bad had actually happened yet, and she would probably find it romantic and pretty or something. But the moment Jasmine's feet stepped inside the clearing, her name once more drifted from the lake, stronger now, and much longer.
Jasmine.
Instantly, I turned my head to look at Jasmine's face, expecting to see a look of fright. But Jasmine wasn't afraid. I think at that point, Jasmine already wasn't Jasmine anymore. Her face blank and pale white, reflecting that dim glow of green, her eyes locked onto the face in the water. "Jasmine, we should go." A cold wind rushed in my face the moment I grabbed Jasmine's arms to pull her away. Her name an icy shriek.
Jasmine.
The face lit up even more now, and a silvery mist rushed angrily past my legs as if a tangle of snakes. Now, I'm not here to make excuses, and I'm not here to beat around the bush. I did leave her there. In that moment, I did everything I could to save my own ass, and I left Jasmine there, only to hightail it back home with a flat tire and nothing to show for it but a girlfriend that's another face on the missing persons wall in the post office, and a $350 bill for a new rim. I know that what happened to Jasmine because of me can never be forgiven. She's gone. She will never come back, and I did that. But I'll tell you this. LakeFace is calling for a new name. Some kid named Dave that's lived down my street ever since we were old enough to ride bikes. Why do I know this? Because when my acceptance letter came in the mail, even before Jasmine's posters went up, I understood LakeFace keeps his promise. And honestly, I never liked Dave anyway.